Welcome to the Pacific Northwest Geodesign Forum. I'm Tim Nyergis, Professor of Geography and Director of the Masters of GIS for Sustainability Management. I'd like to take this opportunity this morning for thanking you all for signing up, registering, being here this morning at this early hour. Hopefully a number of other people will arrive in due time, as it would be. And I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the sponsors of the activity. This event wouldn't occur, at least the students, for there is a free lunch in the world every now and again for students. Students didn't have to pay a registration fee. So the 4 colleges from the University of Washington came together, or at least units, I should say, from 4 colleges came together. The College of Arts and Sciences with the Department of Geography and the Division of Social Sciences, the Master of GIS Program for Sustainability Management within the Department of Geography. From the College of Built Environments, we have Landscape Architecture and Urban Design and Planning that are part of the Planning Committee. From the College of Engineering, we have Civil and Environmental Engineering. And as engineers, sometimes, as it would be, I'm a geographer, a would-be engineer, as the case would be, I think, all these years. The engineers sometimes have a little bit deeper pockets. They didn't even want to bother to go to their dean for money because they had enough to contribute themselves. So that was quite nice for the faculty to get together and do that. From the College of the Environment, we have the School of Environmental and Forest Sciences. And last but not least, the National Science Foundation funded project. It's called the Cyber GIS Project. It goes by the formal title of Software Integration for Sustained Geospatial Innovation.
The next speaker, our next presenter, is Dr. Kathleen Wolf. Dr. Wolf is a research social scientist with the College of the Environment here at the University of Washington. She's been a key collaborator with the U.S. Forest Service Pacific Northwest Research Station in the development of a program on urban natural resources stewardship. Since receiving her PhD from the University of Michigan, Dr. Wolf has done research to better understand the human dimensions of urban forestry and urban economics. She has also worked professionally as a landscape architect and as an environmental planner, and her studies are based upon the principles of psychology. Her professional mission is to discover, understand, and communicate human behavior and benefits as people experience nature in cities and towns. Moreover, she's interested in how scientific information can be integrated into local government policy and planning. She chairs the Social Science Advisory Committee for the Puget Sound Partnership Science Panel, and she's becoming interested in how geodesign might be applied to Puget Sound recovery in a way that integrates built systems, ecosystems, and human behavior. Her presentation this morning is entitled Geodesign as a Socio-Ecological Approach to Puget Sound Recovery. With that, help me welcome Dr. Kathleen Wolf.
Morning, everyone. The numbers are growing as the morning goes along here. Maybe traffic's clearing out there. It's a great pleasure to be here and have a very brief amount of time to present some ideas. I'm following the footsteps of a giant here. My experience with geodesign is started with planning for this event, thanks to Tim's invitation. So what I'm going to start with this morning is not so much a project in the works, but rather an opportunity or a vision. And I've been working intermittently with the Puget Sound Partnership with regard to Puget Sound recovery. How many of you in a week, during your normal activities, see the Puget Sound? All right. This is something then that you may or may not know is going on, but it's incredibly important for not only now and our experience and our appreciation of Puget Sound, but for its future health. And it's a very complex ecosystem. and integration of social and ecological systems. As an example, I didn't have my wits about me. I live on Bainbridge Island. I took the ferry in this morning, and I look over towards Harbor Island, which is an artificial landscape, and probably has the most skeletons in its closet with regard to natural resources, environmental quality, human activity. And there are about 24 fishing boats, recreational fishing boats, people who probably are playing hooky out there trying to catch a salmon or two. That, to me, I didn't have my wits about me, didn't get a picture, but it epitomizes this combination, this dynamic, this integration of resources, legacy, culture, as well as biophysical science for a very important system. Just last week, there was an event, the Salish Sea Conference, and if you're not aware of this, the tribal or First Nations name for this Puget Sound area, also extending into Canada, is the Salish Sea. And here's a sampling of the presentations at that conference. Very much a reductionist science approach. These topics, people very competent, very clever, frankly, trying to get at what are the consequences of human settlement that's adjacent to the Puget Sound. And much of this science is about impact. It's about the consequences of urbanization. It's about the consequences of our everyday lives and lifestyle choices and the effects on the Salish Sea. Most of this work was biophysical. There's a gradual creeping in of social sciences and economics and other perspectives, tribal perspectives, First Nations perspectives in this conference. But largely, it's about this scientific approach that looks at itty-bitty questions, and I'm overstating that. These are major questions, but the way that the science is done is particular or bit by bit. On the other hand, the solutions going forward for Puget Sound recovery require a more integrated outlook. So much of the science that I heard about last week was about anthropogenic effects or impacts with the implication or the implied meaning that they're negative impacts. As a person who brings a background in environmental psychology to all of this, I'm really interested in conservation psychology. Or how do we look at the positive human behavioral contributions to Puget Sound recovery? And then within this geodesign idea, how do we represent that? How do we add that layer of behavioral activity and consequence? The Puget Sound Partnership has included, of late, a bit of behavior change outreach. Initial efforts, very much focused on those biophysical science outcomes, using principles of social marketing to identify audiences, messages, effective delivery, place, location. And much of this activity is rather generic across the entire Puget Sound region. There are public appeals, efforts to engage people who really wouldn't think a whole lot about the Puget Sound other than it's pretty and let's go to the beach. It includes a little more active engagement with regard to education, volunteer programs, citizen science, but very little on the design side. And I'm going to try, as a result of this event, try to carry a greater message to the Puget Sound Partnership about the potential for geodesign and design more generally to address some of the issues for Puget Sound recovery. There are some very initial sorts of efforts, but they tend to be site-based troubleshooting. Okay, so we have failing septic tank systems, nutrients are flowing into the sound, causes algal blooms, other issues. Let's deal with septic tank improvements or enhancements or monitoring. So this sort of issue impact and singular sort of effect or singular sort of producer is what I think now typifies Puget Sound Partnership activity. And if anybody disagrees with this, I would love to talk with you later, because I think we have a great opportunity before us, and these are sort of my generalizations from my activity with the agency. So here I think is the opportunity to take a more multidimensional perspective, goal setting, understand, represent what we know in terms of a mapping geographic sort of system. Think about performance analytics. The partnership is indeed developing indicators, but they tend not to be very geographically located, and perhaps that would be helpful. And then considering the diverse contexts of the Puget Sound. I'm not quite sure why, but when one hears about Puget Sound recovery, often the leaders and officials within the agency are talking as if there's no cities or there are no cities in the Sound. They're talking more about extraction, fisheries extraction and whatnot. They're talking about communities that are dependent on these resources in a very direct economic way, but really not acknowledging not just the impact, but the potential of urban systems to affect recovery. And there are opportunities. Some interesting ideas within other situations. So eco-districts, for instance, an idea where we're not just looking at sustainability or green infrastructure practices, but bringing in human behavior and community response with regard to environmental outcomes. And again, to embrace urbanism, to this a little anecdote. Yesterday, there was an urban ecology seminar up at the Center for Urban Horticulture. And one of my most bright students in urban forestry attended part of the morning, and I saw him later in the afternoon, and we talked a little bit. And this is a young man who's come from a more traditional forestry background and is moving more into arboriculture, which is the management and care of trees in cities on an individual or a grove, small group of trees. And he started his comment about yesterday's session about, oh yeah, cities are a blight. They're kind of a cancer. And then he moved on to resource management in cities. Is that really what we're working with? Or are we looking at the potential for urbanism and urban systems to aid ecosystem recovery, particularly in the Puget Sound region? So what I suggest is using Geodesign, we can start with some pilot projects. Maybe it's just too darn big to take on the entire Puget Sound or Salish Sea Basin, but can we look at some pilot projects where we integrate the creation of space, the creation of place, an overlay of this biophysical science, and as well as some of the emergent social science about human behavior and response to social marketing? And might we choose several pilot projects that represent the different contexts or landscape situations of this basin? So we could start right at the water's edge, the near shore, and we could look at, say, Harbor Island. We could then look at residential situations. There are many beach communities or at least communities, residential communities where people are appreciating and enjoying that view and contact with the sound. So looking at that as a pilot. Then perhaps moving up into the suburbs a little. So if you think of the landscape gradient from snow-capped to white-capped, from the top of the peaks of the Cascades down to that shore, could we move upland a little bit where we know that the consequences of water quality do indeed go downhill and become cumulative as we approach the near shore? So then finally, there are working landscapes up near the edge of the Cascades, interspersed through this watershed, working forests, agricultural lands. Might we look at something like that as a pilot study as well? And then I think a really important social overlay is where are the communities, where are the places that have the political will to take this on? Not every community in this state or in this basin would be willing necessarily to be a test case, to try different things, to try different policy, to try different code, to try different incentives and interventions with regard to land use. So looking for those places that have the political will and maybe an enthusiasm for taking on this sort of thing. So let me summarize then. The Puget Sound region is an incredibly complex socio-ecological system, and that presents some opportunities. We have now an extensive biophysical science knowledge base about this system, the organisms within it, the different regions or the different areas within, from near shore to pelagic, coastal, and so on. what is the array of recovery responses that are possible? That is now becoming a focus for the Puget Sound Partnership. And I think Geodesign then offers a remarkable opportunity. It addresses systems. It can be place-based. It's an integration of design, ecology, and social systems, and we can look at multidimensional performance and monitoring. Are there pilot sites? How would we identify those pilot sites? How would we outreach to those communities to say, hey, could you give this a try? What would be needed fiscally and technically in order to do that? So again, I hope this array of ideas might spark off some conversation. If you have any thoughts about the potential for this, I would love to hear them, and then perhaps we can take them to the partnership as something to move on going forward. And I appreciate having a few minutes here to share these ideas. Thank you.